everyone, get ready for a deep dive. Today, we're going into a world that might seem strange at first, but it actually has a lot to teach us about ourselves. We're talking ants, and more specifically, we're diving into the Ant Mastermind. We'll uncover what these little creatures can teach us about, like social structures, cooperation, and maybe even a bit about, well, us.
Yeah, it's amazing these creatures are so often overlooked, but they've created societies that are really complex and, in lots of ways they mirror like aspects of human civilization, right? Especially when we think about things like the division of labor and how they balance individual needs versus the needs of the group.
Yeah, exactly. And before we get into the details, let's just start with a fact that'll blow your mind. There are more than, get this, 22,000 known ant species.
Wow.
Yeah, 22,000. That's more than all the mammals and birds combined.
That really shows you how successful they are, evolutionarily speaking. They've adapted to almost every environment you can imagine, like from rainforests to desert. And this diversity, it's not just in their numbers, right? It's also in their range of social structures and how they behave.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit.
Yeah.
What are some ways that ant societies are different from each other?
Well, you've got these massive, sprawling colonies, like the leafcutter ants, right? They have millions of individuals all working together in a super organized system. Then you've got species like harvester ants, and they live much more solitary lives. And even within a single colony, there's amazing diversity in what different ants do. Like, that's where the caste system comes in.
Oh, right. You've got the queens, the soldiers, the workers, each with their own specialized job, keeping that colony running. So let's talk about those soldiers for a minute. I mean, these guys are basically built for battle, right? They're bigger, they have those powerful mandibles, and they're always ready to defend their home.
Absolutely. They're the protectors, like the first line of defense against any threat to the colony. And, their tactics are pretty diverse. They spray formic acid on enemies. They create physical barriers with their bodies to block intruders, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I've even heard that some soldier ants will actually, sacrifice themselves to protect a nest.
That's right.
Serious dedication.
It is. It really shows how, for them, the survival of the colony comes before the individual. And it makes you think about how different evolutionary pressures have shaped social structures, right?
For sure. It makes you wonder, how do those ideas of duty and self-sacrifice compare to the way we see them in human society? It's a different type of social contract.
Exactly. And that's a theme that keeps coming up as we explore ant behavior. Now, speaking of fascinating roles within the colony, we can't forget about the queen. She's the ultimate matriarch, the one who makes sure the colony keeps going.
She's basically the heart of the whole operation.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've read, she's not just laying eggs all day. She has some pretty impressive biological adaptations that, keep her going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She has a thicker exoskeleton to protect her and a special organ called the spermatheca, which lets her store sperm and lay thousands of eggs throughout her life. It's like she's built for long-term stability and productivity.
Wow, talk about commitment.
Yeah.
And speaking of reproduction, I was reading about how diverse ant mating rituals are. It's crazy. You've got everything from mid-air copulation to intricate pheromone trails.
Yeah, it's just another example of how incredibly adaptable they are. And then you have species like the cardiocondyla ant, where the males actually sacrifice themselves after mating.
Wow. Going above and beyond for the next generation. It makes you think about that concept of, covert contracts, something we talk about a lot in the red pill community. The sacrifices and roles in an ant colony. They might seem extreme, but they really show us all the different ways societies can approach power dynamics and how to balance individual needs versus the needs of the whole group.
It's a fascinating comparison, and it really shows how looking at these seemingly alien behaviors can give us new perspectives on our own social dynamic.
Okay, so we've talked about soldiers and queen, but what about the workers? The ants we see out and about all the time, they're the ones that keep the whole colony going, right?
Yeah, totally. They handle everything, like foraging for food, building the nest, taking care of the young, even defending the colony if they have to.
It's like they're the ultimate multitaskers, always on the go. But how do they know what to do and when to do it?
That's where their communication system comes in, and it's way more complicated than you might think.
I know they use pheromones, those chemical signals. Right. But is there more to it than that?
Pheromones are definitely a big part of it. They leave trails to food, mark territory, signal if there's danger, even help them recognize other ants from their nest. But they also use touch and even sound to communicate.
Wait, sound? Ants actually make noises?
They do. Some species, they rub body parts together to make sounds, kind of like cricket. And those sounds can signal all kinds of things, from where the food is to if there's a threat.
That's wild. So they have this whole, intricate language we're just starting to figure out. And it makes you think, what can we learn from how they communicate?
Well, think about it. They can coordinate all these super complicated tasks, but they don't have a single leader, no written plan. It's decentralized, like each ant contributes to the good of the whole colony.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, look at those amazing structures they build. Those nests aren't just piles of dirt, they're like architectural masterpieces.
Exactly. And they're so well designed. They have ventilation systems, chambers to store food and waste, even special nurseries for the young.
I remember reading about those leafcutter ants. That they actually grow fungus inside their nests. It's like they were doing agriculture millions of years before humans even existed.
It's a perfect example of symbiosis. The ants, they give the fungus a safe place to grow and a food source. And then the fungus, it breaks down the leaves into nutritious food for the ants.
So it's like they've created this perfectly balanced ecosystem, like within their own society. It makes you think, are there similarities between how ants organize their societies and how human societies develop?
Definitely. You see similar themes like, specialization, working together, finding a balance between what individuals need and what's good for the group. And looking at these similarities can actually give us some interesting insights into the history of our own institution.
Okay, but ants aren't all about harmony and cooperation, are they? I mean, I've heard some pretty crazy stories about ant warfare and even, wait for it, ant slavery.
It's true. Ant societies can be just as ruthless as our own. They'll fight wars over territory and resource, and some species, like the slave-making ants, they actually raid the nests of other ants and steal their young.
So they literally raise these stolen ants as slaves. That's kind of messed up.
It is, but from an evolutionary perspective, it works. The slave ants do all the work, which lets the slave-making ants focus on, getting more territory and power.
It really makes you think. Cooperation isn't always the goal, even in societies that seem so focused on the collective good.
Right, and it brings up some interesting questions about how power dynamics work in different societies, both human and ant.
Speaking of power dynamics, let's talk about the queen again. She seems like she's in charge, the ultimate authority. But is it really that simple? Is she really the one calling the shot?
It's not as straightforward as it might seem. While the queen is super important for, reproduction and making sure the colony continues, the workers, they also have a lot of influence.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, they're the ones who decide which eggs get taken care of and which larvae get the best food. So they have a say in who becomes a queen, a soldier, or a worker.
Oh, so the workers actually have a role in shaping the future of the colony. It's like voting, in a way.
Yeah, you could see it that way. It's a more subtle kind of power, but it shows that even in a really structured society, like an ant colony, there's still room for individuals to influence what happens to the whole group.
It makes you wonder how much control individuals really have, even in systems that seem, totally rigid and predetermined.
Right, and it's a question that applies to our own lives, too. We might think we're in control, but there are always these unseen forces, social structures, and cultural norms that are shaping our choices and our future.
Okay, so we covered communication, construction, warfare, even a little bit of ant politics. There's just so much to learn. But I'm really interested in the idea that ants might help us understand how human social structures began.
It's a fascinating area of research. Anthropologists and sociologists, they've been looking at ant societies for decades, trying to figure out how our own complex social structures evolved.
So what have they found? What are some of the key takeaways?
Well, one of the most interesting similarities is this idea of division of labor. Just like in ant colonies, human societies have developed all these specialized roles and professions. It's made us more efficient and productive.
It's not just about efficiency, right? It's also about creating the sense of interdependence.
Yeah.
Everyone has a job to do, and everyone's contribution matters to the success of the group.
Exactly. And that sense of interdependence is something that's often lost in, modern societies. We've become so focused on individual achievement and competing with each other that we've kind of forgotten about the importance of community and working together.
And it's interesting because you could argue that the decline of traditional institutions and the breakdown of community and this rise of individualism, those are all things that have made things harder for men today.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking connection for sure. And it shows how important it is to understand how social structures affect our lives, both good and bad.
So what can we learn from ants about rebuilding strong, resilient communities that actually support all their members?
Well, ants show us the power of clear roles and responsibilities, good communication, and a commitment to the good of the group. These are ideas that could apply to any group, from families to neighborhoods to whole nations.
It's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right? Between what individuals need and what the group needs. And maybe, just maybe, these tiny creatures can give us some clues on how to find that balance in our own lives. We've talked about all these amazing similarities between ant societies and human societies, But one thing that keeps blowing my mind is how they solve those really complex problems without like any central leader.
That's a really good point. They pull off these incredible feats of coordination and problem solving, and they do it through a process called stigmergy.
Okay, stigmergy. Break that down for me. It sounds kind of like a sci-fi concept.
It's actually pretty straightforward. Imagine like a bunch of ants searching for food. As they walk, they each leave a pheromone trail behind them. So if one ant finds food on its way back to the nest, it leaves a stronger pheromone trail. Then the other ants pick up on these signals and they follow the strongest trail. It ends up being a really efficient way to find and get resources.
Oh, I see. So it's like this feedback loop where, individual actions end up creating a kind of collective intelligence, sort of like how trends go viral on social media, right?
Exactly. It's a system that's not centralized. The collective behavior just emerges from these simple actions that each ant takes. And it's crazy effective.
It makes you wonder, could we use those same principles in human organization? Could we make systems that are more adaptable, more resilient by using that, wisdom of the crowd?
That's a fascinating question. There are actually researchers looking at how to use ant-inspired algorithms, to make traffic flow better, manage logistics, even design more efficient communication network.
That's amazing. So these tiny creatures, they might actually hold the key to solving some of our biggest problems. But I want to go back to something you mentioned before about how traditional institutions are breaking down and this idea of individualism on the rise. It seems like a lot of men these days are feeling lost, disconnected, like they just don't have a clear role in society anymore.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. And it's something ants can teach us a lot about. In an ant colony, every single ant has a specific role, a purpose. They all contribute to the good of the colony, and they're valued for what they do.
It's like that sense of belonging we talked about earlier. Everyone's got a place, everyone matters.
Exactly. And that sense of belonging, well, it's often missing in modern society. We're taught to focus on our own individual success, to compete with each other, instead of working together, for everyone's benefit.
Which is ironic, because when you look back at history, some of the greatest things humans have achieved have been because of people working together, coming together to build something bigger than themselves.
Think about the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, even landing on the moon. None of that would happen without a shared goal, a purpose, and a willingness to put the needs of the group ahead of, individual desire.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson we can learn from the Ant Mastermind. It's not about giving up who we are as individuals. It's about finding a way to use our unique talents and desires to contribute to something bigger.
It's about recognizing that we're more powerful when we work together, and that together we can achieve things that would be impossible for any one of us to do alone.
Well said. So I want to thank you for joining me on this awesome journey into the world of ants. I know I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too.
It was great being here.
If you want to learn even more about the incredible world of the Ant Mastermind, definitely check out the Ant Mastermind. You can find it on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books. It's a must-read for anyone who's curious about these amazing creatures and the surprising things they can teach us about ourselves and our own society. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning from the amazing world all around us.